Life relevance in education. So this is a very important topic. And unfortunately, in many schools at the middle school level, the high school level, college, university, it's almost rarely discussed. Our educational institutions have become more of testing, scores, numbers. A lot of times it's difficult for teachers to create that personal experience, and administrators too, because they have so much stress and pressure to get these test numbers to the point where the student's almost just a number, an identification number. And unfortunately, when this happens, naturally, students lose interest. The intrinsic desire to learn is gone. When we think back of original learning, even going back to Socrates, a hiking trip, coaching, students do that because they love to do it. It's natural. But in education, in the classroom, a lot of times we lose that joy. And that's something that's happened for the most part the last couple of decades. There's been a trend. So in this lecture, we'd like to talk a little bit about restoring life relevance in education. And this is brought to you by the ELA and Hidalgo team. I'm a lead consultant. My name is James Donahue with the team. And our series revolves around a multicultural and multilingual anthology. There's 10 novels here. And I'd like to show you a little bit. We have our basic series, which is more for middle school students and high school. Could also be used for ESL. In this series, we've seen that students are just intrinsically motivated to learn. And when students are intrinsically motivated to learn, it makes all the difference in the world. Especially if you're a teacher and you've had a more difficult classroom. Let's say you're teaching middle school students and they just really don't want to be there. Maturity level's not so high. It's like pulling teeth sometimes, or juggling, like a clown, just to get the students to pay attention. And what we've seen in our series, as we've been piloting it with middle schools, high schools, colleges, etc., the students just want to read. They want to do the exercises, which is English language arts. Our advanced series, similar, but it has a lot more depth to it. And some people might think, oh, but the advanced students, why do they need to be motivated, or why do they need life relevance? Well, because they're human beings too. If a high schooler is an AP student, honor student, they too want to know, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? What's the benefit besides just getting a grade? So before we get a little bit further into the program, just want to talk about some major concepts. You could say socio-economic, that we have to deal with. And for myself, I'm in my 30th year in education. I've been a teacher at pretty much all levels, middle school, high school, college. I've also been an administrator. So I've been around, and I've been in many schools that have a variety of different cultures, ethnicities, etc., economic classes. So I've been in some of those tough classes too. I've been in a few classes where probably half of them were gang affiliated, if not, and I'm probably being generous when I say half. So let's think about just the fact that our students are people. And I know we all know that for me as a teacher too, but sometimes we just get so pressured, like, okay, test score, test score, test score. Gotta pass a test, gotta pass a test. Whether it's the SBAC or some type of benchmark test. So let's again go back and see what is it that we're dealing with, because as many already know, we're not just teaching a subject, we're teaching people. And in this case, again, teenagers, they're really looking for their identity. We're competing with 1,000 other interests, whether it's social, going out to parties, or some of the peer pressures, even of alcohol and drugs, or just having fun with video games, watching things in the movies or television. So I think that relevance, and I believe most teachers or all teachers would agree, is a huge aspect that unfortunately it's getting tougher and tougher to do, especially with so much curriculum that's based more on expository. Literature has been almost taken out. So first of all, little bit shocking maybe to some, but the United States has the world's highest rate of children living in single-parent households. For some, that might be a so what. I don't know. But I think for many, that reaction hits home. And just to be sure, because unfortunately we live in a world, especially with Twitter and certain digital programs, social media, that unfortunately people give hyperbolic responses. And so I just want to say, okay, let's look at this comprehensively. Is there anything wrong with being a single mom or single dad? No, of course not. But what we are saying, to be objective, is that it is much more difficult. There's no denying that. I have many people in my life that have been single moms or single fathers, and I don't know any of them that would say, oh, I'm so happy to be a single parent. No, maybe they're happy and they made the right decision to do so, but probably they went through a very painful separation or divorce or abandonment, and constantly think, gosh, if only I had a partner, husband, wife, etc. It'd be so much easier financially, taking turns, whether it's cleaning the house, having those role models for children, etc. It is much, much more difficult to be a single parent. And some single parents are not even the parent. It's an uncle or an aunt. So sometimes it's not even the biological parent that's the single parent. So when we look at these statistics, we see that more than 3 times the share of children around the world, again, we're number one. Unfortunately, that's not something that we want to be number one in. And also nearly 25 million children have an absentee father. And statistics show the absence of a father has a huge negative effect. Again, want to make it clear, is it possible to have other role models? Of course. Coaches, teachers, uncles, maybe even a Sunday school teacher, etc. But there's no denying not having the father and mother in the family, in the household constantly does have a negative effect on kids. And in the United States, we're seeing this huge trend. So we can see in 1960, 73% of families, nuclear families, had mom and dad. Then in 1980, it goes down as a dip, but not huge. But now we get into 2014, which is fairly recent. I'm sure it's even lower now, 46%. All right, so children with parents in first marriage according to race. I want to make it clear that I believe very much in the ELA and Hidalgo team looks at humans as humans. And I think there's been way too much emphasis on race. And a lot of times it's not a good thing. But sometimes it's interesting just to look culturally and see if there's some trends there. Amongst Black Americans, 22% are children with parents in their first marriage. And then Hispanic, 43. Whites, Anglos, 52. And then Asians are the highest at 71. Sometimes we wonder about why Asians do so well in education. This seems to be an indicator. A lot of it is the nuclear family of being together. Let's continue. Children with parents in first marriage according to education. Again, we see a trend. For high school, at 33%. No doubt, part of this is simply because economically with the high school diploma, it's going to be more difficult to have a really strong job. It's possible, but it's much, much more difficult with salaries, health insurance, stability, etc. And even just the fact of education itself, that not always, definitely, a person has the ability to be very smart and knowledgeable by going to the library and a plethora of different experiences in life. But still, there's no denying going to college, going to university, even vocational school, it gives us more access to people that are experts, more skills. So it's not even just a job, but it's making decisions in life. We see here it goes up higher if you attended college, and college graduates are 67%. So again, more stability amongst more education. We see a trend there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the conclusions that we could come up with, because again, we want to be objective when we look at this. So first, problems with children from fatherless families can continue into adulthood. These children are 3 times more likely to end up in jail by the time they reach age 30 than are children raised in intact families, and have the highest rates of incarceration in the United States. Speaks for itself. All of these do. Single mother families are more than 5 times as likely to experience poverty as married parent families. Single fathers and cohabiting parents are also more likely to live in poverty. There's just no denying that it's extremely difficult to work and take care of children, especially if those children are small. I know for my own family, and we've had our struggles like everyone else. So again, for you single parents out there, we're here to applaud you for doing all that you can. And are there times when a single parent is better than both parents? Sure, because sometimes we have 2 parents that are horrible, or one of them's horrible, and it's dysfunctional, and sometimes that single parent is incredible. But again, talking with everyone I've ever met, I've never met anyone saying, I'm just so glad I'm a single parent. I would never want to have a husband or wife or partner, helping me and being there. No, if it's a good relationship, it's just stronger. Just like a team is stronger than just one person. You're working together with synthesis. Even changing diapers, people are sleep deprived, and then you have to work on top of that. Or the double income, but living in one home is just so much easier, so much more stable to get ahead in life. And then finally, for a lot of girls, and this is always something interesting to me, but the father seems to have this crucial element in the family. You'd think maybe just logically cause and effect relationship to, okay, moms for daughters, fathers for sons. But there's something about, and moms are incredibly important, maybe they're even more important, I don't know. But just statistically, the father seems so crucial, even to help young ladies develop, to feel protected, to know how to deal with the opposite sex as they get older and start dating, etc. So there's been a real trend for young girls, say middle school, high school, college age, to really deal with addiction, depression, sexual activity that was not positive. It could be a teenage pregnancy, could be just a bad relationship that scars them. So, social difficulties. Once again, we're dealing with people. And sometimes as instructors, it's hard to remember that. Nowadays, our classrooms just aren't the same. I remember reading a statistic that in the 1950s, they had like a list of the top complaints, and teachers wrote things like chewing gum in class, getting out of their seats. Now, most of us that have been in the front lines, in some difficult schools, some tough schools at the middle school, high school level, we would laugh at that. We're thinking more about this. Again, I've had some classrooms where at least half of them were gang affiliated and had to be separated because some were in rival gangs. We have so many girls that have been sexually abused. So again, they're dealing with that emotionally when they're trying to be in school. A lot of students are sexually active and they don't really have the maturity, the emotional maturity to deal with that. And again, some lead to teenage pregnancies or even a decision of an abortion, or just they're scarred. There might have been like a date rape. These are some heavy issues. And then 58% of high school seniors surveyed said that they drink alcohol, and then 13% even say binge drinking, where they just get drunk and get sick. And then 25% on a survey said that, yes, they're involved in illicit drugs. So again, some major social difficulties, challenges, problems, etc., as teachers that we're dealing with at the middle school, high school, even college, university level. So let's look at some conclusions here. A lot of teenagers are dealing with some heavy psychological issues, and that's without even mentioning stress levels of just performing well in school. They're dealing with relationship issues, they're dealing with family issues, and it's just a difficult time of life at the middle school, high school level, even college, but middle school, high school especially. A lot of teenagers in certain areas have to deal with the peer pressure to even join a gang. I remember I had a friend, and this was back when I was in school, so it was a while back because I'm getting old. And I remember he came to middle school, so this was only, 7th grade. And he was beat up pretty bad. And I said, hey, I don't want to say the name, even though nobody probably know this person, but just to be on the safe side. And I said, hey, what happened? And he said, oh, I got jumped. I go, oh man, we were only in 7th grade. We were 12, 13 years old. And I said, was it a rival gang or just some dudes that were trying to mess with you? And he said, no, it was my own brother's gang, his older brother. And I said, what? Why would your older brother do that? Because I don't want to join. So they said they're just going to keep roughing me up until I decide. So for those of you that are teachers in some difficult areas, rough areas, again, we've created Between Two Worlds to be very character building, to have real significance. And gang affiliation, there's some themes in there that talk about that. Let's move on. Still have one more area that I'd like to address. And that's that a lot of times, especially with politics and education, unfortunately has become more and more political. We see that we hear the word minorities all the time. And I think there's two real factors I'd like to address here. One, we need to make sure we don't have static thinking. Because a lot of times we say minorities, 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 and really what it means is just they're not white or they're not Anglo. But the truth is, we're not living in the 1950s. The United States has many areas where white people or Anglos are not the majority. In fact, they are the minority. They're not even like the second highest population group, if you want to go by ethnic lines or racial lines. So we need to be careful when we say that. So for example, for Asians, there are certain cities where they're by far the majority. Hawaii, of course, is a state where they are. But looking at some of the others, the Hispanic population has grown incredibly. In certain areas, say Florida, like Miami, you're going to see so many Cubans. You'll probably hear Spanish spoken more than English or no English at all in certain areas. The same could be said of many farming towns and farming communities in Kern County, Fresno area, but even the larger cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, close to the border, etc. So there are a lot of schools, a lot of cities where literally 90% or more, even close, like literally 99 or almost 100 are Hispanic students, mostly from Mexico or maybe Central America, etc. So why would we call them a minority? It's static. It's not real life. It's not reality now. And we should recognize that. And then, of course, there's certain areas where black students, black Americans, are the majority. And some cities where they're the complete majority right here, 1,262 in the United States. So looking at California as a state, the majority, as along racial or ethnic lines, are Hispanics. Literally number one. After that, it would be white Anglo. Texas, number two, but you have 11 million, which is huge amount. As we know, some states do not even have 1 million inhabitants. Their population's lower than 1 million. So that right there is more than several states that could be majority white. Here in California, New York City, again, just some areas where very, very heavy populations with Asians. So why am I saying that? Just to say that the United States is becoming more and more and more multicultural. And we need to be precise in our language. There's no reason to say, oh, a minority, as if it's this tiny, small population, or people don't understand, or it's this very foreign population of people that nobody understands. No, we're talking the city council, the mayor, most of the school principals, superintendents are all Hispanic, or all black, or all Asian. We live in a very multicultural nation, the most multicultural by far than any. So again, a lot of times when we say the word minorities, it's not true. So when we compare that, we'll look at the most population dense country, which is China, and China is 91% Han Chinese. So very specific too. The United States is much more multicultural than other nations, and that allows a lot of richness, but also, of course, we're going to have to learn and grow with each other, a certain level of tolerance, curiosity. It can be beautiful. Other times it could create more tension, and that's normal. That's normal. Just have a new roommate or invite some different families to come live with you. It's not easy. It's not even easy for us to live together as families. So when you get many, many different people, different languages, different cultures, etc., it does take time, and there are more discussions, but there's also more beauty. Because again, think about the other side of this, that if you're with the same people all the time, after a while we get a little bored, or we just don't grow. Whereas if you meet a new person, you get a little more animated, you start talking more. Oh, what do you do? Oh, wow. They're experts in certain things. Oh, you're a contractor? Can you come and help me build this fence or repair this? Or, oh, wow, you're an expert in computers. Can you help me with this? Or, okay, you're wonderful in mathematics. Can you help with this? Or science, literature, et cetera, carpenter, it goes on and on. So there's the beauty of the multiculturalism of the United States. Let's talk a little bit about our series and what we've been doing with this. So again, this anthology, and you can look at our website, alanhidalgo.com, for more information, but this anthology has 10 different novels, and each one is a different representation of the United States as far as culture. But most of the novels have a variety as a cast. But the beauty of it is that no matter where you're at, you could be at a school that's very diverse. You could be at a school that is almost entirely dominated by Hispanics or white, black, Asian, etc. And you're going to find all the novels are relatable and good for people to learn about other cultures. So like one thing that's very different from our anthology is sometimes when I've talked to people about multicultural anthologies, it's about cultures outside the United States, or none of them are white Americans. And with our anthology, no, it's everyone in the United States. So we have main characters that are white, main characters that are black, main characters that are Hispanic, Asian, Arabic, and the list goes on. And in these novels, we also teach character building. So again, high interest themes, bullying, teen romance, immigration, gang violence, peer pressure, personal identity, athletics, etc. That students just really, really enjoy. When they read, they enjoy reading. It's not like they have to read or they're just, okay, I got to get through this. They want to read. But not just talking about it, but what is a good way to move forward? So Martin Luther King, talked a lot about education without character doesn't mean a whole lot. We should be teaching virtues. And sadly, that's something we don't really do too much in school. We want to tell students, okay, we understand you're going through a lot of things, and us as adults, we go through a lot of things too. But we don't want to stop there. But we want to say, okay, if we are able to do these types of virtuous living, you can say, again, personal responsibility, resilience in life, to be strong, to get through difficult times, respect, value our education, goal setting, civil discourse, talk, we can agree to disagree, but let's listen to each other, healthy relationships, etc., etc. And we could go on. We could go on to courage, we could go on to kindness, integrity, etc. Shows us a way to move forward. So another aspect of the anthology is very, very unique is even though it's primarily all of English, because it is for English language arts or ELD, English language development, and sometimes we still use ESL, English as second language, for students that are immigrants or first generation. But in our novels, we have a smattering of different phrases, sentences, sometimes even words. And as you can see here, our team, when we wrote the novels that create the anthology, we had many, many different linguists that helped and editors. And we have Spanish, and not even Spanish just from Mexico, but from Puerto Rico, from Argentina, where it's spoken a little bit differently. For example, in Mexico, someone's just going to say something like, tú sabes que tenemos que hacer la tarea de hoy. And then in Argentina, they're going to say like, vos sabés que tenemos que hacer la tarea de hoy. So a little bit different in accent and even the form of the words, just like English is spoken differently in California to New Jersey, etc. We have Tagalog from the Philippines, Russian, Arabic, Spanish, again from Puerto Rico, Chinese, Italian, Spanish from Nicaragua, Central America is also slightly different. French, already mentioned Spanish from Argentina, German, Portuguese, and the Portuguese from Brazil more than from Portugal, and Korean, and some Nigerian slang or pidgin English. Then that's because of the characters. These languages are there because they represent the characters that are in the anthology. So, first anecdote that I'd like to explain a little bit, and these are personal ones, okay? So these are true experiences that I went through as a teacher, and I still teach. I'm working as a consultant with the ELA and Hidalgo team, but I still teach at this time because I want to keep sharp and apply everything, and so I don't want to be just someone who's been out of the class for 10 years talking to fellow teachers. I am a fellow teacher. I'm currently a teacher. I have been an administrator as well, so I can relate to most school officials and what they're going through. So I was in a very at-risk class. If you're not familiar with that term, at-risk usually means that students are at risk of dropping out or failing. Sometimes people don't like to use that word, which I could understand. Maybe it seems negative, but anyway, that's been a term that's used often. And it was one of those backhanded compliments. The assistant principal at a particular high school said, hey, James, I have a special assignment for you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, exactly. What's that going to be all about? I was already suspicious when he's smiling. I didn't think it was going to be something incredibly wonderful, but probably something difficult. And sure enough, he said, we're finding that we have only like one or sometimes two or three at the most students that are almost ruining the class for the teacher and the fellow students. It's not all of them. It's just like one or two. So we think if we could just get those 1 or 2 students, put them all in one English class, we would save all the others from constantly being interrupted, difficulty getting through the curriculum, bringing the environment down with negativity and just making the teacher stressed out. And he says, and kicking the student out. So I was a little bit leery, but thought, okay, it sounds like a good challenge. Why not? So we started, and sure enough, it was a disaster. And again, I was a veteran teacher. I'm trying to teach them the normal curriculum, Romeo and Juliet. These were basically sophomores, juniors, seniors that could not pass freshman English. And it was general, of course. And then I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. So you could probably already guess that they were not too much into it. It was like pulling teeth. It was difficult. I still remember, even though this was, about probably about 10 years ago. I still remember, though, I would literally after the period just go like this and keep my door locked for a while before I'd let the other class in, just rest. And before that period, it was I think second or third period, I'd be already a little bit tense, oh, okay, now this group. They'd come in super loud, a lot of times the cursing, and I can't just go, okay, you said a bad word, you go to the office, you two, you two, you two, you. I'd kick all of them out. And sometimes I'd talk to them and they'd say, hey, Donahue, kick me out. They wanted to leave. Again, half of them or more were gang affiliated. And so I told, after maybe a month of just feeling like a failure and I'm not getting anywhere, and even the curriculum coordinator told me, oh, maybe you're burned out. We knew this could happen, so we might try to rotate teachers, give you 1 month each with this group. And I said, you know what? I've just started working with the team, and they're developing this curriculum called Between Two Worlds. And at that time, the team had just created the first series. We're on 3rd edition now, and we've really perfected it and want to promote the series to other schools, because we've been piloting it long enough to know it's very, very effective. But this is when we're just barely starting. In fact, when I talked to the team, they're like, well, yeah, you could pilot it. We're still working and editing a lot. But I said, no, I need something. So I talked to the vice principal again, and he said, well, it doesn't seem like anything's working. And is this aligned to Common Core? And I'm like, yes. And if you look at the English standards, they haven't really changed that much. This has everything you're going to need: vocabulary development, reading comprehension, reading analysis, essay composition. The workbooks have everything. The novels are really strong. May I try it at least? And he goes, yeah, sure. And so I was kind of at the point where I wasn't doing anything according to what a good, effective teacher should do. So I want to be really honest, because I still remember very much that I literally got the 1st edition books, and I just walked around carrying them, and I walked through these little rows, and I just said, here, and I slammed them. I literally just clam, plam, and they're like, hey, what? And what's this? What do I have to do? And complaining already. And I just said, shut up, just read it, okay? Just read it. Because again, full disclosure, I was so frustrated that I wasn't being super teacher. I just wanted to survive. They were wearing me down. I was getting really frustrated. They would just give me trouble every day, disrespect, answer back. So, complain. I go, just read the first novel. And it was called The Decision. It's about a first generation, young Mexican American boy, and it goes through his life, Manuel de la Rosa, and talks about as he grows older, he has to make all these decisions. And he confronts his older brother wanting to drop out of school, his mom and dad not really being too involved in his education, not caring about school. Some of his peers get into school, some don't care at all. His other older brother gets involved in a gang and wants him to get involved. And I don't want to tell too much of the story because I want you to read it. But to my shock, after a few minutes, I heard something I had not heard before in a long time. And You might guess what that was. It was silence. I was just like, wait, what? Like, I think I could hear like bzzz of the clock. I go, oh my gosh, what's that? And then I just like, they were reading. They'd never done that before. Never. Not even for like a couple minutes. And I was just shocked. I go, wow, they're actually reading. And then I see them turning pages. Because all these novels are designed to keep the students' interest. So they average from about 30 to maybe 60, 70 pages. So we call them mini chapters. So you're going to get the plot, structure really fast. A lot of times, like even for me as a teacher, sometimes I have a book that I know is really good, but you have to get through 50 pages before it even gets interesting. The students are like, oh man, getting through the introduction and the settings and the cast of characters. With these books, no. It's like a good movie. Just a couple minutes in, you're hooked. And so after like 20 minutes, I thought, man, this is strange. They're just so quiet. They're reading. And so I remember I thought, well, probably I should teach. So, okay, let me get the workbook. So I got up and, okay, let's go and look at it. And they go, hey! And they got real mad again. I'm like, what? You guys, we need to start the first. They go, Donnie, they wouldn't even call me Mr. Donnie. It was just Donahue. And they're like, Donahue, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're going to do it first. And they go, hey, we're in the middle of reading. You're messing up the story. And I'm like, so you guys just want to read? And they're like, yeah, let us finish. And I'm like, oh, okay. So the bell rang, and half of them just stayed there in their seats. And they just kept reading. I'm like, guys, you need to go to your next class. And they're like, all right, fine. Hey, well, can I take the book with me? I'm like, no, because I know I'd probably never get it back. And so they're like, oh, man, this was cool. Oh, man, okay, so tomorrow, we're going to read this again tomorrow, right? I'm like, yeah, tranquilo, yeah, we'll read it. So they were almost like, we're not going to do a different lesson or go back to William Wordsworth. So next day, read, and then they were far enough to the story. I'm like, we really need to start the lesson, but I promise you, we'll keep reading. Like, yeah, okay. And that was the beginning where I thought, wow, this really works with an incredibly difficult class. And I can say, as that class wore on, and I started, going to more novels in the anthology, and there are some that are too advanced. We have, again, a wide variety. There are 2 that are really more for honors or college level, but the others are really wonderful for high school, and there might be a couple a little bit mature for middle school, but probably middle school or high school could do 8 of the 10. Like I say, the other 2 would be more for seniors in high school, juniors at least, or college age. So I saw their characters change too. And one student, he was just like this. I could say he was moved. And he was like, wow. He said, you know what, Donahue? He said, this just reminds me so much of me and my own life. And he goes, so many young Hispanics, we just get caught up in gangs or sometimes just want to work in the fields, whatever. At the school where I was at anyway, it was more of a agricultural area. He said, man, I need to go to college. I don't want to end up like this. And so it was really wonderful. And I can tell you, I also work at the college level, and I did see that same young man. So it wasn't just talk. I actually bumped into him. I go, hey, how you doing? And he was taking classes at the community college. So that was pretty cool. Okay. Second one, with this anecdote, I had kind of the same problem where I was teaching, as some of you remember, a Casey class for the California High School Exit Exam. And we had this really wonderful, supposedly computer program, has all the standards and hits every part of it. And that's very typical of a lot of computer programs. But I would take them to the lab, and I literally started seeing students like this on the desk and just going. I go, hey, are you even reading or paying attention? What? Yeah, but obviously they weren't, they're lying. It's just the little excerpts they'd have to read were just so boring. They didn't relate to them. They just didn't care. So even though it was aligned to all the standards, there's no life relevance. There's no life purpose, no connection. They couldn't relate to them. So they got terrible scores. And I told my admin at the time, I said, hey, nobody wants to teach these classes because it makes us look bad. he goes, yeah, I know what you mean. I go, I mean, no one wants to teach him because literally, we'll have like, after a semester, one student out of 25 or 30 pass. So it makes us look like we're terrible teachers. I said, you know what? I had some success with that at-risk class that you gave me a while back. I think it'd be perfect for these guys too. Their attitudes are much better, but their skills are very low and they have very low interest in school. And a lot of them are immigrants or first generation. So I think this curriculum would be great. And the administrator at that time, he was so happy with the first response. He said, you know what? Yeah, let's buy a couple sets and let's get it to some of the other KC teachers too. And so sure enough, I taught the second novel, which is about a young lady named Lorena Olorcissimo. It's called More Than Tradition. And I had this one Filipino student that was from the Philippines. He was an immigrant. He'd only been at the school maybe a couple months. He didn't speak too much English. And all of a sudden, we have little excerpts of Tagalog, and I said, I think I can read this as a teacher, but probably not too well. And I said, would you like to? He goes, oh. And he was always really, really shy. And all of a sudden, his eyes lit up, and he read it, and everybody's like, oh, hey, so what's that mean? And do we need to go to Google Translate? And all of a sudden, this kid who's super shy, didn't participate much, probably felt really lonely. A lot of the other kids didn't talk to him a whole lot. He was one of maybe only 2 Filipino students in the classroom. All of a sudden, he's like the hero. He's the center point. And so it was really wonderful to have that relationship in a multicultural fashion. Then I had another young lady. She just was a troublemaker. She was actually very smart. Just didn't care about school. And then one day she didn't come. I said, hey, where's so-and-so? And they're like, oh, Mr. Donnie, I think she was kicked out from another class. She's in class suspension or in-school suspension, where some high schools and middle schools have a class where you don't suspend them out of the school, but they have to stay like in a detention room and get their work. And so I go, oh, okay. But then the next day, she came to the class, and I go, you're done with suspension? She goes, no, I'm still in it. And I go, well, what are you doing here then? She goes, oh, I talked to my friend, this other young lady that I mentioned, and she said that Lorena is going to have an abortion. And I go, yeah, that's in the story. She has to make that decision, and that's a tough one. And she goes, well, my teacher gave me permission so I could be here so I could read and participate. And I was like, wow. Oh, I go, really? You want to? And they go, yeah, because usually when the students get kicked out, they almost want to be kicked out or don't care. But she literally wanted to come to the classroom just so she could participate. And she could really relate, which is also another beautiful aspect of multiculturalism. This young lady was probably a middle class, Hispanic, Mexican American young lady, completely American. She might have spoken a little Spanish, but not really. You don't have to be Filipino to relate to the character, but she totally related to her because they were about the same age. This young lady was very pretty and had more than a few boys that liked her, and I think she could probably really relate to this. I don't think she was going through an abortion, but just she could relate to Lorena very much, who was a young pretty girl, but from a nice family, very sheltered. And then she gets involved with a slightly older boy, and he starts challenging a lot of her traditional beliefs. So my last one I'm going to mention, just in case some teachers are thinking, well, this is good for at-risk students or real low-level students. When I say low-level, I mean their educational level. But what about if I have an honor student or a CP student? Well, again, all the novels are very interesting, and the work is very challenging with the reading analysis, the essay compositions, etc. But we do have 2 novels in particular that are precisely written for honors, high school, and college university. So the last one, novel 10, Beyond the Elite, that is a novel that actually has 2 parts. So together it's about 150 pages. And in that one, it basically revolves around 2 Black American high school young men. And both of them live with their grandfather because They come from dysfunctional families, and the grandpa is very tough, but grandpa and grandma are wonderful people and really raise them well and try to teach them well. But in one of the main parts of the plot is another main character named Dr. Timothy Ajala. And he's somewhat of a genius, and he's just tired of the world and the political systems, probably like a lot of us. And he just decides that the only way we're really going to transform society is to try to create Plato's Republic. And if some of you are AP teachers, usually that's junior year with AP language and composition, this is very typical. Maybe not all teachers do it, but many do. And many other advanced classes have Plato's Republic. And if you've read it, you're probably like me, going, It just, after a while, we get lost because Plato gets into really, really deep philosophy, and just he's incredibly verbose. Like sometimes he'll take 3, 4, 5 pages just to make one point. And you're like, you could have done this in one sentence. So I had my students reading it in AP Lang, when I taught that course. And they're like, Mr. Donnie, we're sorry. Some students, because most AP students are wonderful, and they want to go to a top university. They're very motivated. And some even told me, I even tried reading it twice, and I don't get it. Book 7, I think, talks a little bit about the 3 types of people to create society, but I'm just kind of lost. And I thought, And I talked to admin again. I said, could I assign Novel 10? I think that will help them so much to understand. He's like, yeah, Mr. Downey, it's your classroom. And so Novel 10 Beyond the Elite was assigned. Again, the workbook comes, the teacher's edition has full multiple choice test, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have all our essay types: argument essay, expository, response to literature, narrative, etc. And so AP Lang, you want argument. And it goes all into normative ethics. It goes into the 3 classes of people that Plato believes society should be around. And to have like a philosopher king or a governor that's not built on race, not built on skin color, not built on economic situations, because most people are politicians, are wealthy, the far majority. And a lot of them are lawyers, etc. And so Dr. Timothy Ajala is like, we need to go back and say, none of that matters. Just whoever is the most intelligent and competent, they need to be at the top. Nothing else matters. Skin color doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. Economic class doesn't matter. And we need to start training these gifted people, even from school. That's as far as I'll go, so I don't give away the entire story. But one of the main characters, Terrence or Terry, who's also a top athlete with his cousin Aaron, he gets a little bit, you could say, sucked up into this. And it's just very, very interesting how he has to respond. And the students were like, now I understand. Now I get Plato's Republic. Okay. Those are what the principles are based on. So then we got into these really dynamic discussions using the workbook as well, because we have a very special Socratic method. You could look at our other videos for that. It's a very, very precise way of doing the Socratic method. In my opinion, of course, I'm a consultant working with the ELA Hidalgo team, so a little biased, but it's by far the best. By far the best. I've never seen anything even close that rivals it on how to conduct a Socratic seminar. Like this workbook, it doesn't have all the exercises that correspond to the novel, but just purely Socratic method and higher order thinking. So the students started talking about democracy, republic, Plato's Republic, totalitarianism, theocracies, communism, socialism. Why do we have these types of governments? Why do they work? Should we have a society in which you can change and upward mobility? Should be based on popularity? Should a basketball or baseball player, for playing with the ball, make literally tens of millions of dollars, and someone who picks up the trash or works at Walmart, or even say us as teachers or a nurse, make minimum wage or $50,000 or $70,000? Why is that? What are the values there? And so let's just say it was really, really wonderful, and it was a huge success. And students did much better on the test because they really could understand the concepts and argumentation. So to wrap up, again, if students do not have true relevance in their lives, when it comes to education, we cannot fully expect that they're going to perform at their highest level. It just won't happen because they're human beings. They're not robots. They're not machines. All of our series addresses not only the academic aspect, but again, the real life aspect, the human aspect. Because I think every teacher would love to have students that are intrinsically motivated. So thank you very much.